Good afternoon and welcome to the 10th Annual Minority Trailblazers in Sports Conference. My name is Dr. Paula Jackson and I am the founder of this event. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today. I want to start off by saying thank you to Texas Southern University for allowing us to host here today. The HPE department as well as the Department of Athletics has been kind enough to allow us to take over this room for the next 2 days to bring this information to you. To give you a little bit of background about the event, I started this because of my journey into the sports field. It was a little bit difficult, a little bit different than the most because I wasn't a traditional athlete. So I had to figure out a way to get into the business. I thought that there should be some type of way where those who were trying to get into the business could speak and network with those that were already in the business. Since I was already planning events, I decided to come up with this idea. I called some friends of mine who were actually working in the NFL at the time and said, if I do this, will you come? And they did. The rest is history. And now we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. We started in 2000, but we did every other year. And then, of course, we had to take some years off because of COVID. So this is our first year having this event on a college campus. This is our first year having this event in Houston, Texas. So we are really excited to be here and so excited that you are joining us today and tomorrow, hopefully. So our first event or our first panel of the day, we will talk about diversity and inclusion in sports, where it started and how it's going now. At this time, I would like to welcome our first panelist up. I will have them to come up, introduce themselves, and give a brief bio, and we'll go from there. Thank you all very much. So we'll start on my far left.
Lori Williams. I serve as the Deputy AD for Leadership and Strategy at LSU. Get my title.
I'm Stan Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Moore and President of Stan Johnson and Associates.
I'm Jasmine Hamilton, Dr. Jasmine Hamilton. I am an Associate Professor at Prairie View A&M University in the Health and Kinesiology Department. And I also do university planning and assessment and accreditation too as well.
Awesome. So as you can see, we have a very diverse group here. So I'll start off and ask, can you provide an overview of how diversity and inclusion in sports has evolved over the years? And I'm going to start with Stan first because he's been very instrumental, specifically in the collegiate landscape. He did not tell you, but he's also worked at the NCAA previously. So I'm, pumping him up a little bit now. But let's start with you, Stan. I know you've started a lot of organizations that address this topic as well.
Yeah, diversity, equity, inclusion has come a long way. I think back to the years of when I've been in this business, when we started with actually what we call sensitivity training for individuals in this process. And then we moved to diversity, then diversity and inclusion, then diversity, equity, and inclusion, now diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so it's come a long way from where it was back in the day. And so I think we've moved into understanding. A lot of people still don't understand diversity. I think diversity is under attack today because they don't really understand. We're still trying to educate people about what this word diversity is. Diversity just means difference. That's all it means. And so there's going to be difference no matter where you go. There's going to be difference, whether it's in your physical makeup, whether it's your skin color, or whether it's thought, diversity of thought. That's all going to be there. And so when people start attacking diversity, what are they really attacking? And they're not attacking that part of it. I think that's a disguise, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I think we've come a long way from where most people looked at diversity around the hiring process. It was just about hiring. How do we get more people of color into the organization, especially in athletics, when we look at it. When I started, there were three athletics directors at predominantly white institutions that were minority or persons of color. And so when I walked into the NCAA, they said, well, we only have three. And so I began to look and did a study and said, no, we got about 56 or 60 or 70 athletic directors. Well, they were discounting HBCUs and not being there. And those individuals work just as hard to do what they need to do to be able to be successful. So, we have to really look at what are we really talking about diversity. And I think it's come a long way to where we're now about 15% of the athletics directors, if you talk about that position. But there's been a whole host of individuals that have come in other positions. And not everybody wants to be a D1A athletics director. And so there's a whole lot of opportunities for people to come into diversity. And I think come into a university, and institutions and organizations are looking for diversity. And so I think we've come a long way from that standpoint of being able to provide and make sure that people are ready to take those positions if you measure it only by the hiring process. Now, we got a lot of work to do about inclusion. A lot of work to do around equity.
Yes.
And I think those are the things that are coming under attack, the equity, the inclusion parts, not the diversity part. So from my standpoint.
Yes, so from an academic standpoint, and looking at how it has evolved, looking at the study of sport. And so initially, everything was really just kind of centered around activities and physical education. And then as time has gone through, we've now got this fancy word, kinesiology, to show that, it's rooted in science. But then we have all of these other subdisciplines, sport management, sport journalism, physical education, sports sociology, sport history. And so going from that standpoint and looking at training the individuals to go into, those areas and those aspects of sport, that's kind of been the evolution. So from an academic side, and then also too in studying and critically looking at the things that are in and around and involved within sport too, as well, has also evolved. We've gone from being that sports fan. A lot of times students are like, I love sports. I'm like, great. It's great that you are a fan. However, we need to start critically looking at some of these things and strategically looking at a lot of these nuances and aspects too as well. And so we have all of these theories, that are surrounded with sport and fan identification and, all of this other stuff too as well. And so I'm glad to see that has happened within a study and really more of kind of a scientific base with it. But then as we go into who is able to do the studying, and so with those three words, or now adding the extra letters, now we're starting to look at who has access, who is even aware of these other opportunities too as well. And so when you talk about all of these different things and how we have evolved, that is still at the crux of it too as well. Who has access and who's aware of these opportunities, these other things that are going on too as well. So we're like I said, we were work in progress. But it is, I'm glad to see that now we have these spaces of higher education, these spaces of higher levels of learning, not just in a formal sense, but also in an informal sense as well. And with the social media, that is allowing more people access, to different platforms, to different things to further understand, people's perspectives, their viewpoints, starting to break down these three words, diversity, inclusion, and equity, and understanding its variety. And as you said before, it's a natural occurring thing. I mean, if you look at it, you have four people of African American, of African descent on the stage, and we're all different. And even if you look at the three women we have, it naturally occurs. It's in nature, it happens, but are we going to be accepting of it? Are we going to allow it into our space? Are we going to actually look at somebody else that has a different viewpoint or different perspective, whether we agree with them or not? And y'all know from social media, that is not always an easy thing.
That's true.
But getting to that point and understanding that, and I think that's where we are in that evolving process, is being more aware and now looking at those levels and those points of access.
I completely agree with what they said, and from my perspective, a lot of it comes down to really who's in the position to make those access, to make opportunities available, who's creating the pipeline or not. And so whereas I think from the perspective of head coaches, we've definitely seen some changes there. But again, it starts at the top. So the presidents, who's sitting in that seat, the athletic directors, who's sitting in those seats where they're looking at a football coach. Is it someone where you would automatically look to say, okay, let me see who's not represented in this search? No, every AD, as soon as they get the job, they have a short list. If this coach goes out, whether it's football or men's or women's basketball, they have a short list. And it's likely going to be someone that looks like them, or it's going to be someone that they've heard about from someone else who likely looks like them as well. And so it's rare that you have somebody who's willing to step outside of their comfort zone to find that person who might be not at a Power 5 institution, but say, okay, let me give a chance to someone from an HBCU. That would be almost unheard of. But again, coaching is coaching. If you can move the needle, then you can motivate. If you can do those things, the skill set is the same. It's just being able to move outside your comfort zone to say, I'm going to give an opportunity to this person versus the person who is at another, let's say, SEC institution who I've seen compete against our institution and, knows the landscape because they're an SEC guy. And so it's just easier where you just keep switching from school, whether it's Ole Miss to Auburn and Tennessee. It's just a shell game. And so I think it really takes courage to be able to move beyond that and see the possibility that exists there. So for me, I thought it was absolutely amazing for Deion to be able to go from Jackson State to have the opportunity at Colorado. Hope he kills it out there. And then it'll make it easier for the next person to get that opportunity because someone will think about things differently. And I think in the space that he had, he changed how we look at those opportunities as well, because he didn't just go in and, I'm going to be a great coach. He looked to move the program in a way in which there was exposure that had not existed before. And he took marketing to a different level. He took NIL to a different level, even within the HBCU landscape. I would say it rivaled what's happening at any PWI. To get American Airlines to be a sponsor, to travel your team, that's significant. And so just imagine how much more and how much more amplified his reach could be, his influence can be at a school like Colorado. And again, just opportunity and access is what we're talking about.
So interesting you talk about that, because a lot of times we say we're up against barriers. There are a lot of barriers that you kind of mentioned initially, Stan, but even now we're making progress. You gave an example of that, but there's still so much more to do. So what are the barriers that you think we have broken down, and then to what extent, and then where we're going next? We could start from the academic side.
I'll start there. Access to education, that's one. And not just, I have my bachelor's degree and then, that's it. Now I know there's also other social things that are involved in that too, but we're not gonna go there. But now encouraging students to actually get their doctorate, encouraging students to attain those higher levels. And so that's some of those barriers that we have navigated around. I wouldn't say it's completely eradicated as a barrier, but I think that's one way in which we have moved the needle. And looking at the study of sports, you have a number, now it's still a smaller percentage when you look overall, but we still have more minorities and people of color going into those spaces and training up and teaching those that are going out into the industry too as well.
Absolutely. You see so many people now, it's like getting a PhD is a thing now. Everybody's, I'm getting my PhD. I'm like, really? These are not conversations that we had maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Not at
You just
all.
didn't hear people coming right out of undergrad talking about getting a PhD, and specifically in something like sports management, sports leadership. These are still relatively new subject matters to study as well. So moving it from that, this is stuck in my head too. So getting my PhD, my topic was the barriers of African American females seeking leadership positions in college athletics. My first chair told me that was not a viable topic. My response was, this is what I live every day. So how is this not a viable topic? And what I'm trying to do at this point is add to the conversation, add to the research and the dialogue. So that's why I feel like this is important. But again, that's having to teach her as a white female that this is something that's very important for not only me and my culture, but this is adding another conversation to the entire dialogue. So, a lot of times when we're talking about diversity from our standpoint, we have to teach. This is a teachable moment, and it's not just about getting into the seat, being an AD, but even from an educational standpoint, a lot of times we are up against barriers there as well. And I'll get off my personal soapbox right now, and I'll turn this back over. I'm sorry.
One quick thing, and bring up something else too that I thought about too as well, not just those personal barriers, but those that have come before us that had to kind of carve and create their path.
Correct.
I've been thinking about myself, I'm not, that old, but when I was going through my doctoral program at LSU, there was not a sport management doctoral program. So I kind of had to create, the segments and merge things in together so that I could have that experience and the research the things that I wanted to. And so I think about those who came, before me, and those words or language or terms weren't necessarily out there, but the way they've had to meander and carve those paths to where today we do have these opportunities in these areas that we can go into that focus on us, that we, our research isn't told that way. Well, some people still do, but for the most part, you can find people that are accepting and say, yes, this is something that matters.
Absolutely.
I would say a barrier continues to be really access. And so then the question becomes, how can individuals who look like us, who have those positions, create those pipelines so that those behind us can find an easier path, so that it's not always the next generation trying to carve a new path, but really making it easier for them to follow something. And so that's one thing that, at least at LSU, we're being very intentional about. And so I'm so excited that this year we have this graduate program that we've created intentionally so that we can have a path and it's exposure for those who may not know exactly what they want to do in intercollegiate athletics, but they know they want to do something. They know they love sports, and it's just, I want to do something, I need a chance. And so often it's just about having an opportunity and exposure to what's out there. Because I know when I started, I didn't even realize the breadth of this industry that existed. I had no idea of this machine that's behind intercollegiate athletics. And so having that exposure to all of the pieces and all of the units that make this engine run, but then also allowing us as administrators to get exposure to these young people who are amazing, who otherwise we would not even know existed. And so it really benefits both sides, because now we say, okay, we don't have a position right now, but you do amazing work. And I guarantee when somebody is good, they create a position for you. We might not have them right now, but we want you on our team. We see the value that you bring to this organization. We'll figure something out for you. But if you never know who those young people are and what they can do and what they can bring to your organization, you continue with your status quo. We're posting for a position and we reach out to our network of people that we know that look like us, and the pipeline continues in that way. But being very intentional about creating programs and initiatives that allow for those individuals who otherwise might be overlooked through the traditional hiring and graduate opportunities. And then also understanding that for many of us, it's a financial consideration too, to go in and take a graduate assistantship when maybe you have financial obligations that mean I need to get a job. I can't continue, I'm supporting family, whatever it is, this GA position is great and this is my foot in the door, but I need a job that pays because I have bills and I have a family to support that might be different from someone else with a different background, a privileged background that allows them to take a GA position for 2 years and still be supported in a different way by their family. And so also being intentional about that and looking for those opportunities to create space for those who can't go the traditional path if it doesn't work for them for a myriad of reasons. So I think when we talk about barriers, sometimes there are financial barriers that don't allow people to follow a traditional path that might exist for others. And so being sensitive to that as well and trying to, again, create those opportunities in really creative ways to just get people in the door so that then you can expose those amazing people to others who are not only hiring in your institution, but will go on to take those positions in the C-suite and then say, hey, I remember that young person who did X, Y, or Z. Let me call that person up. Even if it was for a semester, you come in and created an impression that's lasting, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So again, so much of it is access, and it looks different, a little bit different for everybody.
Being the old person on this, this panel, I'm just seasoned, y'all wanna call it seasoned. See, that's the difference, so I think I call it old, you call it seasoned. And I say, diversity, equity, inclusion is under attack, and I know I'm going to ask you a question about barriers, is because generational dynamics is not under attack under that process. Physical disability is not under attack. International students are not under attack. What they're really under attack is race, gender, and LGBTQ issues. But they want to call it diversity. They're going to have something to blame it on and don't want to call it what it actually is. Those things are under attack right now. And so barriers that we have had, and I go back and look, as I said, I started in this business a long time ago. And I remember when we didn't have a black quarterback at any of our schools or in the professional ranks. We've intellectually broken that barrier now. That now everybody wants a black quarterback. They can run, throw, do everything that they need to do. Breaking down the barriers of that you can't lead the organization. We have a number of ADs that are leading organizations that are multi-million dollar organizations. They're doing what they need to do. So we've broken that barrier that you can lead. It's just, will people give you that opportunity and access to be able to do that? Because you can't say that Gene Smith in Ohio is not leading, Ward Manuel is not leading a large organization. We've got them all across the country leading organizations that we've never led before. We got basketball coaches winning championships. We got football coaches winning championships, doing things that they need to do, offensive coordinators, and in positions to be able to break the barrier to say we intellectually couldn't do this. We've broken that barrier. Now it's just about access and opportunity and giving us that access and being there. I think in the field of athletics, when I think of athletics, we never wanted to, we've always pushed people to come into this field and they would be in compliance or student services. That's where they were. And now are in coaching, and those nurturing positions. We now have people in development that are leading development fundraising efforts for the universities and doing those kinds of things. So I think intellectually we've broken some barriers that we can't do. We can do and we do a damn good job of it when we do it. Because we always know that we have to do a better job. We have to work. So that's one of the biggest things that I think we've broken. But now it comes down to, are people going to give people opportunities? Are people going to be able to? And that's just pulling the trigger. And so a lot of it is just breaking down those kinds of intellectual barriers that we have to continue to break down. And that's another one, is the access, being inclusive and giving equity to people in the process.
So you've all talked about, the access, and now we talk about being ready once you have that access. Because if you come in and you make a mistake, that's it. You're done, and anybody coming behind you is done. So talk a little bit about, and Stan, I'm gonna start with you this time because you've developed a lot of initiatives and programming to make sure that minorities are prepared once the access is given. Can you talk a little bit about initiatives?
Yeah, I think there's, and I say this all the time, people kind of my people in MOA, and I am the executive director of MOA, which is the Minority Opportunities Athletic Association. There's 5 different levels in athletics. People coming in at the entry level wanting to get into this field, people who are in 1 to 5 years of experience, people in the middle of the pack, and those people are in senior, associate, or deputy levels, and then people that are at the top sitting in the chair. And all 5 of those levels have different types of needs. And we have to prepare people. When we begin to prepare people, we have to prepare them where they're at right now. I'm not trying to prepare you to be the AD if you're just now getting in. I'm trying to prepare you where you're at right now to be able to move through the process and understand what this process is all about, how this system really works. And it doesn't work just on your performance. Performance is very, very important. If you don't perform, we'll go out and get somebody else to do it. The industry has what's called replaceable talent. That's what it is. And right now, we got a lot of jobs out here. And I used to say, I don't want to get 500 people ready for 5 jobs. Now we got 500 jobs and don't have 5 people ready for them. So there's a lot that we need to do in developing individuals. But performance only counts for about 10% of you moving up the ladder. A lot of people say, well, why do you say that? If I've got 1 job, got 2 people that perform 150%, what am I going to base moving them up the ladder on? It's not going to be on their performance. You got to do that. You have to work, and I'm not discounting performance, but you also got to know what is the image that I have, and how does that fit into the process, and thirdly, who knows me and who do you know? That is called the old boy system, and it's around, and it's been around for a long time. And so how do we teach people to get prepared to understand that? Also, people always also ask me this question, says, Stan, can you teach me how to play the game? I said, no, can't teach you how to play the game. I said, but I will help you try to understand the culture that you're stepping into. Because if you can understand culture, you will be able to survive and succeed. If I send you to China to live, you have to understand the Chinese culture. You can't just speak the language. You got to be able to understand what the culture is. And if you can understand culture and read culture, you'll be able to survive and succeed in that culture. I say this all the time. If I took a kid off of 25th and Prospect in Kansas City, where I live, which is the inner city, and put him in Overland Park, if he goes out there playing games, he's not going to survive. If I take a kid out of Overland Park and put him on 25th and Prospect and he goes down there playing games, he's not going to survive. But if they understand the culture, they'll be able to survive and succeed. And so what we have to teach is how do you understand the cultures and no matter where you go, every place you go, you step into a different culture. And if you can read that culture and understand it, you'll be able to survive and succeed. So that's what I think we have to continue to teach, is teach them how to understand where they're stepping into. Who are the players? What is the system? Because you don't get to set the culture. And that's one of the things I think a lot of people coming in and says, well, I'm going to change this culture. Okay. Let's see how that works. It's no different from me coming into your house and saying, I'm going to rearrange your furniture. I'm going to change the culture. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to kick me out of your house. And that's the same thing when you walk into an athletics program or into a job in any process. You got to understand what the culture is to be able to survive and succeed, not go to play games. We don't like playing games. We don't want to play games. We want to be judged. And what we've been told, though, all our life, work hard, you'll get ahead. This is all about my work. Judge me just on my work. That's not the way this system's working. And we've got to learn that and help young people and help individuals, no matter what level they're at, understand that process.
Initiatives like this?
let's see, initiatives. I know, so we have larger organizations such as like the NFL that have started to reach out to HBCUs and get a number of their students to actually come into those spaces. NCAA too as well, so on the collegiate level, which I know we're at TSU and many of your students and faculty too have been a part of. And so those are some of those great initiatives, having those people reach out to as well. In addition to that, my own group with Dr. Courtney Flowers, Dr. Akila Carter-Prince, Dr. Joyce, who's going to be here tomorrow too as well, Jacqueline, and also too, Dr. Michelle, we have a group, Sister Docs. And so one thing that we look at is we really focus on women in sports because, you know, we talk about sports kind of inherently masculine, and you know, the women and stuff that's in the sport kind of get overlooked almost all the time. I know you cannot believe it happens, but it does happen. And so even within, on the academic side, within researchers and, you know, so on too as well. And so we really have this initiative to help not only on the academic side, so those young women who are coming up to gain their PhDs, but then also to those who are working within sport. I know a lot of time those spaces are kind of separate. You have the practitioners, and then you have the academicians, and you know, sometimes they don't ever cross, but we very much so can benefit, you know, from those areas too, both, you know, areas too as well. So that's one of the programs and initiatives and stuff too that I'm personally involved in. But there's a number of different organizations that do those same things to help and understand, get people to understand those cultural, the subcultures of organizations. And how to, you know, move into that, the gaining of social capital, as you say, you know, academic side. So those people that you come in contact with, networking, you know, putting you in spaces to where you actually have those opportunities to network. It's very interesting getting younger folks to open up to those things too as well, which talking about barriers, that's one of those things. You know, you speak of going to China and it's like, if I can't get Frenchie's fried chicken, not going to eat anything. But that's part of being, you know, open. And one of the things I have to say, I was blessed to have parents who were in the Navy. And so we traveled everywhere. And, you know, we came back playing and stuff. And one thing my mom would always say is look around. Have you ever been to Maryland before? I'm like, no. It's like, look at the people. Look at how they, you know, talk and they interact and so on. And so I can go anywhere and be okay, you know. And I'm still learning. It doesn't mean I'm gonna go somewhere and just run it, but I have that confidence that was instilled in me that I go and observe and you look around and then you figure out, okay, how do I fit into this piece? How do I fit into this area? And so a lot of those initiatives that help with that we're starting to look at now, not just the work ethic, you know, as you talked about too as well, but understanding those intangibles that would help those move forward too.
The fit, a lot of times when you go through searches, you will have people who talk about, oh, they had all this great experience, but I didn't think the fit was quite right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's could be talking about the cultural part and how you navigate the new landscape that you're trying to get into and keeping that top of mind. And personally, I don't like that word fit because it's so abstract. It could be anything. You know, but it's one of the things that you hear people talk about a lot. Lori?
I agree, Paul. I was just about to say, sometimes fit can be code for something else.
Yes,
And
that's why I don't
so
like that word.
I'm with you.
Fit is color of my skin don't look like him, and you know I'm gonna say what I want to say. That's the fit. I don't fit. I don't look like the person who's in it. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was saying.
Stan can just say it. I'm still working at LSU. I don't have all the time.
That's the difference between. Well, that's another part of what our barriers are is that we work in an industry where, and I've had 3 or 4 people get dismissed because of their forward-thinking process is to challenge or to help people grow, and they see that as they're scared of that, a threat. And so that's another part of this barriers that we have is that if you get on campus and you do these things and you become a champion for this process of diversity, equity, inclusion, you can be seen as an outsider. You can be seen as not fitting, this fit, because I don't like that word either. I told the search firms I didn't like it either. What's the right fit? And I told them the same thing, that you talk about race. That's what's coming under attack when you look
Or
at that. So,
to add to that, we're in Texas, and so we have policies and legislature that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And so I do want to actually say I'm part of it, and this is such a good question, because the reason why I'm at LSU is because there was an intentional desire to transform the culture. So when you talk about what's the culture, it's no secret. LSU had gone through some things both on the Title IX side and then some other issues, and all of this coming together with the death of George Floyd too. So it all came together right at the time where we were dealing with race and the reckoning within the United States. And then we had this Title IX issue and sexual assault and how we handled those things. And so we really needed to transform the culture. And I was brought in to help assist in that process. So it is definitely something that one person can't do. And it's not easy to do even when you have a team of people who are intentionally focused on shifting the culture, because one, people are uncomfortable with change, just period. Even if it's for the better of the organization or the individual, it's just easier to stay in your place of comfort. And so I'm so pleased to be at LSU where I can actually, my job is to be intentional and to be a disruptor. Because the leadership has brought me in to do that, but that's not most organizations at all. And so that's why when I tell you we have these different initiatives that we put in place, because we are being very intentional about moving things to a place where we can truly be a transformational culture, where it's not just checking a box and saying we have these initiatives that fill whatever DEI quota or anything like that. No, it is truly about what are we doing to transform the culture. And so that has to be more than about numbers, but really changing the hearts and minds of people so that they view what we do each other in a place where you can truly feel included and have a sense of belonging. And if we can do that, and it impacts our student athletes and our coaches in a positive way, then we can impact the community as well. Because again, truthfully, LSU sits right there adjacent to a community that for years didn't feel welcome on the campus. And we can't ignore that. And so we're being very intentional about making the community a part of what we do as well. And that's one of the priorities that we have as the athletics department. And so again, all of those things make me really excited. And it's what got me to LSU from Grambling, where I was previously working, because I wanted to be a part of change. And so finding the fit for me was going somewhere where they were similarly aligned and wanting to do good things and being open to whatever diversity could look like, whether it's diversity of thought, race, religion, socioeconomic background, whatever it is, embracing all of it. And then being able to say, okay, now this is all out there. Who do we want to be? Is it lip service, or is this really about who we are? And if we're about it, we're going to put the resources behind it. And so again, initiatives, we're doing all sorts of things to be creative, not just to create a pipeline, but to create a place where fans have a sense of belonging when they come to our events. Mm-hmm. And whether it's a baseball event or football or basketball or gymnastics, do you feel welcome on our campus? And if not, what are those things that we need to do so that people will feel welcome? Because again, we talk about DEI being a moral imperative. It's also business. Mm-hmm. More fans mean more dollars, more revenue. We are not in this business to lose money. And so again, there's the moral imperative, certainly, but there's a business upside to it as well. And so we're trying to embrace it from all aspects and weave DEI into everything we do. It's not just DEI stands alone over here, but yeah, how are we making our business decisions? Diverse suppliers. How are we impacting our hiring process? And are we being trained so that we can look beyond just what we think is the right fit and looking outside the box? Yes, this person may not have everything, but maybe that's a good thing that it doesn't look like the traditional compliance person or the traditional SID. And let's explore that person's credentials a little bit more, because we have this. we have the cookie cutter model of what that looks like. This person can add a little something different. And we need that. So yeah, let's consider that person in a way that we might not have otherwise. And so it's kind of everything that we do is an initiative. Everything we do is to weave DEI into the fabric of who we are.
That's great. I mean, I think that sounds like a great model that a lot of other institutions should follow as well, especially now, because a lot of times it's just lip service. You know, we have our assistant AD for diversity and inclusion, and they sit there and all they do is, you know, like you were saying, check the box. You know, okay, we had this program today and, you know, sign the roll to make sure everybody, you know, we can say that everybody showed up, that sort of thing. But listening to you and, you know, bringing you in, I think this was a new position when you went there, correct? So they're being very intentional, as you said, about making sure that it's not just lip service, we're not just a part of this trend, but actually putting some teeth behind what they're talking about.
And I want to add something, not that it's, and I believe in the position that needs to be there, but I know Laurie does a good job. Other people that are in this position do a great job at what they're doing. But DEI is not just that person's responsibility anymore. And see, a lot of times what happens on the campus is we assign a person to the thing. So now, not my responsibility anymore. I don't have to do it. No, it's still everybody's responsibility. And it works when everybody sees it that way. That it's still my responsibility to do things necessary to help Laurie do what she's doing. She's just gonna be there to remind you that this is what you're supposed to be doing, because I started out in the NCAA and I always said that it's not that they didn't like Stan Johnson, it's that they didn't like what I did when I came down the hall. Because when I was coming down the hall, was talking to you about why you're not hiring people of color, or why you're not doing this, or what are we doing? And so I think that's the key, is that we have to realize that diversity, equity, inclusion is not just one person's job. It's continuing to educate people that it's still everybody's job and everybody's responsibility, from the coaches to the administrators to the maintenance people to everybody in the organization. How do we make people feel that they belong to our organization? And that's part of the process. That's the belonging part. People have equated belonging to just LGBTQ. That is not. It goes way beyond that. But we get stuck in there, and that's something we can push up against. That's why I say diversity is not under attack. It's certain elements inside of it that's under attack, because I got something to push back against. But I throw it all up under the same thing. Diversity includes white males. And so, okay, if we're pushing against diversity, we don't want to have diversity, so we're gonna stop teaching white males too? It's certain elements that we're pushing and we disguise it. They're disguising it that way. We really got to get beyond that.
So you've all talked about the initiatives and how it's having an impact. How do we sustain that? How do we grow it and sustain it? Because it seems that obviously this is a trending topic now, something that everybody's talking about. But how do we be really intentional and sustain the goodness of the programs, like, you know, taking yours and making that a model at other institutions, or having other institutions wanting to do that, because some don't. They don't see the importance of it right now. So how do we do that? And whose responsibility is it to do that? You know, Stan, you touched on it a little bit, but how do we get other people to really understand what this means and the impact that it can have? You talked about it also from a business perspective. And we all know athletics is, we get all into our feelings about the wins and losses, but at the end of the day, this is a business, you know, and we have to run it that way. So from this standpoint, how do we run our businesses in a more diverse and inclusive way, and then sustain that?
One of the things I do, it was part of my job. I said I'm president of Stan Johnson and Associates, my own firm that I go out and I teach diversity. I work with assessments. I do a lot of different things. But one of the things I've understood is that we have to approach diversity in a different way. I approach diversity from the standpoint of how does it affect productivity? And that's what I go out and sell. I'm going to affect your productivity. How do we help people be more productive? And if we're going to create an environment where people can be more productive, we're going to create an environment where people feel like they belong, people feel like they're included, all of those words that we use. And so how do you come at this about how it affects productivity? To give an example, I like to use examples. If you ask your development officer, why don't minority individuals give back to their institution once they become alumni? Guess what? Because they didn't feel like they belong. So now, if we want to get our minority individuals to give back and want them to be more productive, this is going to affect our productivity. It's going to help us raise funds. Shouldn't we be creating an environment where they feel like they belong? Because the individuals that give back to their institutions felt they belonged. And if you don't feel like you belong, you're not going to give back. A lot of us know that. We don't give back to them. They call me every year and ask me to give some money, and I do give $25. Something that I didn't feel like I belonged there in front of that. You know? And that's a shame because I shouldn't feel that way. But guess what? I'm not going to give money. I'm going to give money to those things that I feel like I belong to. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to continue to do to sustain this. We got to make people feel like they belong. And we've got to create that kind of environment and come at this not from the standpoint of the social thing to do. This affects teams being able to play together. It affects a team in a way that I talk about student athletes. We don't haze in athletics. Against the rules. But we do have this thing called initiation, where young students, the grunts, the new students come in and they have to carry the bags and we treat them bad and do everything. Now, if one of those students, if you treat them that bad and they don't like you on your team, and I don't blame it on race, gender, whatever it is, but guess what? I may be a math whiz and I'm not going to help you. I just affected my team's productivity. So we don't look at it from that standpoint, that if you embrace how do we make people feel like they belong, they can help each other both on and off the playing surface. All we look at it is just as the team, that's it, and how we play. I'm not gonna play hard against you. I may have a way of helping you understand how to do this play that the coach wants you to do or what. But I'm not gonna help you because we created this competition. There's a such thing as healthy competition, I believe it. Everybody should have that. But when we create those things where people won't talk to each other, don't want to work with each other, then guess what? It affects our team's productivity. And a lot of that can happen when we talk about race, gender, age, sexual, all of that stuff happens within that process. And we create that kind of place where we don't want to play together. NIL is creating some of that right now. I hate to say that, but there's, the linemen ain't getting the money that the running backs get. And I feel kind of, hey, guess what? I'll open this hole for you. Should I get some of that money too? And people don't understand how that affects team dynamics. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about all of those things. And that's important. And people are attacking diversity only from the standpoint of just about race, gender, and that's what it's about, and LGBTQ. It encompasses all of those things.
That's actually was my train of thought too as well. When you look at how productive, how successful, how we want to deem, success that people are whenever you've successfully infused it, in these different areas, and you see the outcomes of that really helps. And learn from that word assessment. I do assessment, and anybody that's in academics, when they hear assessment, it's like it's a 4-letter word, it's a dirty word. So one way that we looked at changing the culture was we were like, okay, because words trigger people, we're not going to use that word. But we're still going to have you do what we need you to do without necessarily using that word. And so whenever we dropped that word from our conversations, from the emails, and then we were able to get people in, and it was just like, okay, well, what did you all do? Okay, what did you do to fix this? And they're like, oh, that's it? But yeah, that was your assessment report. Now, and I'm saying that dealing with inclusion and diversity would be that straightforward or that easy. But sometimes one, you have to just gotta get over. Some people don't like the word, some people just won't use the word. But you have to be consistent. You have to be strategic in building, that culture. And it's something that is not going to happen overnight. But really putting those different things, those things in place. If you need different roles, if you need certain people in different roles, if you need different people with different capabilities and abilities in those different roles, and that way everyone feels that they have value. They understand their role and how they are contributing to that group, that organization, that cause. That is another thing that goes into, now we have a sense of belonging. Now we have an inclusive environment. Now we have those things that we have to move forward. So when conflict does arise, we have those tools to move forward. The one other thing that I'm going to add is succession training. A lot of times people get in positions and they do great and amazing things. And as soon as that person retires, moves on, or whatever, all of those great things are over. And then those people who are around, who were part of the program or part of different things, they're like, well, I don't know, so-and-so always did it. And then it's it just dropped, it's over. Other times, some people just like to keep their stuff because it's like, it's my stuff, and I don't want to share. But if we have those great things, one, being able to share stuff with, the world. And I liken that to, I have a daughter. When I first had her, if anybody as parents, it's like, it's my kid, I don't want anybody messing, with my kid or whatever. But also realizing that my kid was a gift to share. So, I let her go see her grandparents from time to time. Yeah, I do. Y'all sure do. Oh,
That's another subject.
she grown as well. Yes, it's a whole different subject. But, being able to, yes, this is an initiative that I started, but yes, I do want to have people. So that succession training is another huge point, that once you leave or you're out of that position or out of that area, that the people are coming up behind have a blueprint, to continue on, and they're not trying to figure it out or whatever, but they have the tools to even take it and elevate it. Also other words that came to mind was innovative, ingenuity, and that's another thing that is definitely happened within diversity, within the evolution of sport too as well, is that we are continuing to push, but you have those that have left that blueprint too as well, and that is very important.
And I would just add on that, even with the healthy competition within the SEC, we have a group of DEI officers. And so we come together and we talk about different initiatives that we have on our campuses. And one school in particular, it was an experiential learning opportunity that they provided where they would take their student athletes to Africa. And I thought, this is an amazing opportunity. And so they could combine service and education, all within the lens also of DEI. And so let me just call and see how they did that, because we're trying to create something for our student athletes. Study abroad doesn't really work so well with student athletes because of their time commitments and all the things and the narrow windows between breaks and all of that. And so being able to reach out and say, hey, how exactly did you all do that? And them understanding that it's not just about their institution and them getting ahead and them being able to outpace us, but it's about creating opportunities for all underrepresented individuals within the industry. And so there was no pride and ownership of, no, we're going to keep this at our school and not share it with you. They understood and appreciated what works for our student athletes, and our brown and black student athletes will benefit yours as well. And then we all rise. And so again, not just keeping it, but being able to share it, even with another institution that you're competing against, but being able to look beyond the competition of the sport and what's best for society and what's best for this industry, and being able to collaborate in that way, I think is really important as well, and being open to sharing. Because again, if I don't have to recreate the wheel and I can take what you've built and modify it for our institution, because this is how we can make that work, then we all achieve more. And so I think, again, it's having those conversations with people either across the conference, across the industry, and being able to say, hey, what's working for you, or what didn't work? And let's see how we can work from there. And even creating partnerships, because we haven't done it at LSU, but there were some other institutions They were playing somewhere together and they took a group of student athletes from 2 institutions to Selma. And it was, again, an experiential learning opportunity. 2 competing institutions, but they thought this is an opportunity for our student athletes to learn about America's history. And let's come together and do this. And it was amazing. And so now we've said, okay, now if everybody finds those pockets of history within their particular city, even if the coaches don't carve out the time, because again, time demands on our student athletes and they're so regulated in their schedule. So if they come to Baton Rouge, yeah, let's go to the museum where you can see where the very first bus boycott occurred. That's Baton Rouge. And then that was the model that was later used by Dr. King. And so having those little pockets where you go to those cities, because we're all going to each other's cities and communities, let's use that. It doesn't have to be a big trip to Africa, but it's you're coming to Baton Rouge anyway. 30 minutes, let's go by and visit X. When you go to Knoxville, whatever is happening there, let's go visit that. And so again, taking advantage of those opportunities while you're in that city, and student athletes just honestly, they're in their hotel rooms, playing games, listening to music, on doing whatever, you can also be learning as well. And so again, what can we do to help shape the minds of our student athletes who hopefully will become future administrators, future coaches? If they can look at their experiences differently, then why not use that opportunity when they're there anyway? So just again, being creative in how we address this and talk to them about these really important issues. Because I think many of our student athletes don't know. They don't know a lot. And this is no offense.
They live in their little
It's so different.
student athlete world.
Absolutely. And there's so much that they're missing. And then it's our responsibility to educate them. Many of them are not interested in that because it's going to the league. And in the SEC and at LSU, that is a reality for many of them. But also the other side of that reality is, how long is that career professional sports going to last? So are we educating you not only to get your degree, but are we educating you to become good citizens?
Absolutely.
Are we creating a sense of belonging so that you want to come back, not just with your dollars, but come back and talk to future student athletes who are following behind you, and whatever lessons you learn maybe will help them from making those same mistakes, or maybe chart a path that, hey, I didn't know I could do that. How did you get to become, an analyst on ESPN? Ryan Clark, what was your path to get where you are? And being able to give back when sometimes it's not just your money, but it's your time and your talents as well.
That one thing that is so valuable, hearing other people's stories about how they got into these positions, which also helps with creating that access, because then you understand, like, not everybody was directly like, I'm going to be an AD of this school, and so I did this, and I became an AD. Like, a lot of people have a meandering path, and that's why I tell my students a lot that this is your journey. If another person's doing this, but whatever it is, that is your journey. But hearing that and understanding that really helps too with that access piece, because then you'll hear something in somebody else's story that, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that, or so that's very valuable.
Yeah, that was part of my thought process for developing this program as well, because all of us have different stories. We all work in sports or athletics in some way, but as I talked about in my intro, I wasn't the traditional student athlete. So I couldn't go to my coach and say, hey, can you help me get into this business? I was a cheerleader. My coach worked in the president's office. But, so having these conversations and really providing that exposure, not only to what we do as administrators, great example of, if you're coming to Baton Rouge, thank you for the shout out to my hometown too. If you're coming to Baton Rouge, go visit the museum. This is where civil rights started. And a lot of people don't know that. We had the model, so that's, sharing that information, sharing that history, and that may impact somebody to say, hey, let me go find out some additional information after we leave. Yes, we're here for the game or whatever, but let me ask some more questions, find out some more information, and that could start their path. So you never know.
But that also helps to open that process to going back to what you were talking about with understanding the culture. So the more things that you're exposed to, understand a lot more things, and then you're also able to see those intangibles when they happen. or, you know, to navigate those a little bit better, or know what questions to ask based on, you know, some of those things, but it's not just about your work productivity or your work ethic.
Yeah, Stan and I were talking earlier, and so much of what we're seeing now is cyclical. The issues, they just keep coming back. And so taking those opportunities to say, hey, that's what that was. Okay, I see it. It looks a little different now, but it's the same thing.
Same thing.
And just being able to know how to maneuver and operate within that, being strategic, understanding the culture.
And on that note, I hope you all have enjoyed this. We could talk about this all day, obviously a very hot topic, trending topic. But we didn't even have time for questions. So if you want to talk to our panelists, hopefully you all will be around. But that's it. That's our first panel. So thank you very much. Thank you all.